We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara from Meseches Gitin. This is Gittin Daf 85a. On the previous summit in the Brisa, there's a machlokas tanoim between Rebbe and the Rabbanan. Rebbe says that if you write a condition into the get, it doesn't matter if the condition that's written into the get is Harayat Muteres L'chol Adam Chutz Miploni, that you're mutter to everyone except for so-and-so, or if the condition is Almanas, on the condition that you don't marry so-and-so. In any situation, it's going to be a problem. And according to the Rabbanan, only Chutz is a problem, but Almanas is not going to be a problem. And Rabbi Zera's interpretation of the machlokas tanoim is that the entire machlokas is if it's written before the Torah, before the main part of the get. But la'achar Torah, if it's written after the main part of the get, so divrei hakol kosher. So in that case, everybody agrees it is going to be kosher. Umasnisin de katani kasavo. Now our Mishnah, which says that if he writes the condition into the get, v'ukimna bachutz avol almanas lo pasel, and the only time our Mishnah says it's a problem is if he writes into the get chutz, but if he writes almanas, it's not a problem. So our Mishnah clearly is being lenient by almanas. So there's two approaches according to Rabbi Zera that we could take to our Mishnah. You could say that our Mishnah is talking about writing it before the Torah, and it's only following the lenient opinion of the Rabbanan, because according to Rebbe, if it would be written before the Torah, even almanas would be a problem. And if you want, I could say liachar Torah, that our Mishnah is talking about where it's written in after the Torah, after the main parts, v'divrei hakol, and in that situation, everyone would agree that almanas is not a problem if it's written into the get liachar hatoref. The Rava Amar, but Rava argues with Rabbi Zera, and he says as follows: machlokas la'achar hatoref. On the contrary, the entire machlokas between Rebbe and the Rabbanan if it's written after the Torah. The Rebbe savar gazrinan atu lifnei hatoref, because Rebbe says we make a gezerah just like lifnei hatoref is a problem, so too la'achar hatoref is a problem even by almanas. But Rabbanan savri and the Rabbanan say lo gazrinan atu lifnei hatoref. We don't make a gezerah because of lifnei hatoref. La'achar hatoref is not going to be a problem if he writes almanas into the get. Avol lifnei hatoref, but before the Torah, divrei hakol pasel, everybody would agree. It doesn't matter if you write chutz, it doesn't matter if you write almanas, it's going to be a problem. Umasnisin de katani kasavo. Now, according to the approach of Rava, where our Mishnah says that if he wrote the condition into the get, it's a problem, or if he wrote chutz into the get, it's a problem. V'ukimna b'chutz aval almanas lo pasel, and we said that it's only by chutz that it's a problem, but almanas is not a problem. So, according to Rava's approach, the machlokas and the only one who's lenient is la'achar hatoref. Achar hatoref, you have to say according to Rava that our Mishnah is talking after the Torah, v'Rabbanan he, and it follows the opinion of the Rabbanan who are lenient la'achar hatoref if the condition that's written in there is almanas. And the Gemara continues, Tani Avua de Rabbi Avin Kame de Rabbi Zera. The father of Rabbi Avin taught in front of Rabbi Zera as follows: Kasav get al Tanai, if he writes a get on condition, divrei hakol pasel. Everybody agrees that it's pasel. And so he responded and he said, what do you mean divrei hakol? Everybody agrees the condition is pasel. Divrei hakol pasel? You're saying everybody agrees it's pasel? V'miflag pligi, but they argue in such a case. We just said there's a machlokas Rebbe and the Rabbanan by almanas. It's not that everybody agrees it's pasel. And so the Gemara says, Ella rather, Emo lidivrei hakol kosher. Rather, what it should be is that everybody agrees it's kosher if you have a condition. V'hechidami la'achar hatoref. What are we talking about? We're talking about la'achar hatoref. Meaning to say, again, as we said before, everybody agrees la'achar hatoref, divrei hakol kosher. According to Rabbi Zera's approach, everybody agrees that if the condition is written la'achar hatoref, that it is kosher. But the Gemara continues, V'leima hareza pasel v'Rebbe. But why didn't Rabbi Zera respond? Instead of changing divrei hakol pasel into divrei hakol kosher and saying we're talking about la'achar hatoref, instead you should change divrei hakol pasel to hareza pasel and just say it only follows the sheet of Rebbe and it doesn't follow the sheet of the Rabbanan. And the Gemara answers, Tana divrei hakol asniya. The Tana had the phrase divrei hakol kosher bepasel michlefle. It's possible to mix up kosher and pasel harezeh b'divrei hakol, but to mix up harezeh with divrei hakol lo michlefle, that's not commonly switched, and that's why instead Rabbi Zera said to change it to divrei hakol kosher from divrei hakol pasel. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Harayat muteres l'chol adam. Let's say the husband says to his wife, you're mutter to everyone, elo li'aba u'li'avicha, except you're not mutter to my father, to your father, la'achi, to my brother, la'achicha, and to your brother, or la'evid, to an evid, or u'la'ovid kochavim, you're not mutter to an ovid kochavim, u'l'chol mi she'ein la'olav kedushin, or if he includes anyone, he excludes rather anyone who there's no kedushin anyway. So he's saying you're not mutter to someone who anyway there's no kedushin. So there, kosher, there we're going to say kosher, meaning to say, even according to the chachamim in the previous Mishnah, where if you say Harayat muteres l'chol adam chutz miploni, that you're mutter to everyone except for so and so, that's not going to be a good gerushin. But over here, where you're excluding someone where there's no kedushin anyway, so it's a good gerushin. But the Mishnah continues, Haream uteres l'chol adam ela almona l'kohen gadol. But if he says you're mutter to everyone except as a widow to a kohen gadol, or a grusha v'chalutza l'kohen hedyot, or a grusha chalusa to a kohen hedyot, or mamzeres u'nesina l'Yisrael, or a mamzeres u'nesina mering Yisrael, or bas Yisrael a mamzer l'nesin, or a bas Yisrael to a mamzer or a nesin, v'chol mi sheyesh lo olav kiddushin, meaning to say, any case where it's a prohibited kind of relationship, but there is kiddushin. Kiddushin is possible, and now he's excluding that individual, he's excluding that kiddushin, so that's already considered a shiur. That's already considered leaving something off the gerushin. Afilu ba'avera, even though the kiddushin is ba'avera, but puzzle, but that's still going to be a disqualified get because he's leaving someone off who really she technically has kiddushin with. And Rashi explains, Elo li'aba u'li'avicha lav shiurahu, for my father, your father, that's not leaving anything off. There's no kiddushin with those individuals anyhow. Almona l'kohen gadol, but by a widow, let's say to a kohen gadol, kaven to kiddushin tofsim b'chayvei lavin, because really there should be kiddushin by chayvei lavin. It might be prohibited, but it's still a kiddushin. Kedamrim parakama the kiddushin ulahai lo tafsim mishum iser isha sheba. But over here we're saying because of my marriage to you, you can't have a kiddushin with those people. As shtakach t'shayir begita, that's already leaving something off the get. And again, according to the chachamim, you leave something off the get in that fashion, it's going to be puzzle. Ulachol mi sheyesh lo olav kiddushin, and for anyone where there would be kiddushin im haisa penuya, meaning had she been unmarried, there'd be kiddushin. Ve'afilu ba'avera the iser lav, even though there's an avera here, even though it's a negative commandment, but puzzle, but still the get is disqualified. To have a shear, that's considered leaving something off of the gerushin. And the Gemara says, Klola dereisha la'asuye shar chayve krisos. The generalization at the beginning of the Mishnah is saying all chayve krisos is the same way. There's no kiddushin anyway, so it's not considered leaving something off the gerushin. And Klola deseifa la'asuye shar chayve lavin. And the generalization at the end of the Mishnah is including all kinds of chayve lavin where there is kiddushin, even though it's a prohibited relationship. And the Gemara continues, Boy minei Rav Amir, Rav Nachman. Rav asks Rav Nachman the following question. Chutz mi kiddushay katan ma. What if he says that you're haream uteres l'chol adam, you're mutter to everyone except for kiddushin with a katan? Mi amrinon, do we say hashtam yolav bar havayahu, that right now at this point in time you can't, katan's not able to have kiddushin, so it's not really an exclusion. O dilmor, maybe we say asi lechlal havaya, eventually he'll get older and it will be a time where he can have kiddushin, and so that is considered to be a shiur. It would not be considered to be a good gerushin. Amar lei, so he said to him, Tanisua, we learn the answer as follows. Ketana miskareshes bekidushay avia. We have learned that a ketana, if you have a girl that's a minor, so she can be divorced, even though she has a deoraisa marriage. Her father is the one that married her off, but still you're able to divorce the ketana. And the issue is, Amai, why should it be possible to divorce a ketana? Because the pasuk says that the whole idea of divorce is she goes out and then she can marry somebody else. But this ketana, let's say she no longer has a father, so she can't marry anyone else. She has to wait till she gets older, but yet we're saying you can divorce her. Obviously the reason is because she's being divorced now, and eventually she'll be able to have kiddushin. V'yatza v'haisa simply means now she goes out, and eventually she's v'haisa. Eventually she'll be able to have havaya, she'll be able to have kiddushin. Hachanami, here also you could say the same thing. Asya lechlal havaya, eventually this katan will be someone who can have kiddushin, and so therefore excluding the katan, saying haream muteres l'chol adam, except for this particular katan, that actually is a problem because it's considered to be a shiur. It's considered to be leaving off of the get. And the Gemara continues, Chutz min hanoladim mahu. What if he says that this gerushin is going to be a good gerushin, except for those who are going to be born, who are yet to be born? So hashtam yelo isyulid. On the one hand, you could say right now these children are not born. It's not really an exclusion. Odilmar, maybe asidid misyaldi. In the future they will be born, and so therefore this is considered to be a shiur when it comes to get. Rashi says hanoladim asilin livoli, those who will be born. Odilmar asidin misyaldi mitzur alei, and she's going to be aser mnei isha shel zeh hilkachav shiur. Therefore, maybe it is considered to be a shiur. And the Gemara said to that question, Amar Lei said to him, Tanisua, we learn the answer to that as well. It says, Le'eved u'la'oved kochavim. It says by an eved and an oved kochavim, it says that's not considered to be a shiur. And so the Gemara says, but if it's true that it's considered to be a shiur because something might happen in the future, the children will be born in the future, that's considered a shiur. So eved v'oved kochavim nami, so by a slave or by an idol worshiper as well, avidi d'megairi, it's possible that they can convert. In other words, in the future, there's in a sense no difference than no ladim. In the future, they might be born again, so to speak. And so in such a situation, apparently, that's still not considered to be a shiur. And the Gemara says not necessarily. Hanach lavli igure kaimi. These people aren't awaiting conversion. But hani lisyalude kaimi. But over here, those who will be born in the future, we are waiting for that to happen. That is something that is going to happen, and so therefore that might be considered to be a shiur. And the Gemara continues, chutz mi bal achosama. What if the husband would say to his wife, Hareya mutaris l'chol adam, you're mutter to everyone except for the husband of your sister? What's the halach in that case? Hashta mia lo chazile. Right now, while her sister is alive, so she can't marry the husband of her sister. Odilmor maybe zimnin de mesa achosa. Sometimes her sister might die. The chazile. At that point in time, she will be able to marry the husband of her sister after her sister dies, and so therefore that should be considered to be a shiur in the get. Amar Lei said to him, Tanisua, we learn the answer to that as well. Li Eved ula Oved Kochavim. It says if he says you're mutter to everyone except for an Eved and Oved Kochavim, so in that case she already was not mutter to the Eved and the Oved Kochavim, and so the Gemara says Eved v'Oved Kochavim nami avidit imagairi. Again, the same question as before. The Eved and the Oved Kochavim, they might convert, just like the sister might die, and apparently we don't take that into account. And the Gemara says, no, gerus lo shchicha. Conversion is something that's not common. That's why we don't take it into account. But misa shchicha, but death is common, and therefore maybe we should take that into account. And the Gemara continues, chutz mizanusech ma. What if he says to her that you're mutaris l'chol adam if you marry, but if you have zanus, that you're not mutter to do? Benisuin halo shayir. So on the one hand, you can say in terms of marriage, he hasn't left anything off. She's allowed to marry anyone she wants with this divorce. Odilmor maybe, shayir bebia, maybe he has left something off because she can't have an act of relations with anyone she wants because he said chutz mizanusech. And so the Gemara says, Amar Lei said to him, Tanisua, that also we learn the answer to. It said, Li Abba Uli Avicha. It said, let's say he says, you're mutaris l'chol adam, you're mutter to everybody except for my father or your father. So he said over there, again, that's considered an effective divorce, because anyhow, she was not permitted to the husband's father and to her own father. And the Gemara says, Uvamai. Now, what did that mean to say? When he made that condition, and he said, Chutz li Abba Uli Avicha, what did that mean? Ilema ben Nisuin, if it meant that she can't marry the fathers, so Abba v'Avicha b'nei Nisuin, and is it possible to marry? Can a person marry her husband's father, her own father? Of course not. Elalav biznus. Rather, doesn't it mean to say that he's saying chutz li Abba li Avicha? What he means to say is you can't have znus with my father or with your father, and apparently it's only by the fathers. Oli Abba li Avicha de lo shayir. It's only if he says you can't have with your father, with my father or your father. There, it's not considered a shiur in the get. Halachar shayir. But if it would be any other individual, if he would say that this divorce, harem mutaris l'chol adam, but you can't have an act of znus with other individuals, apparently that is a shiur in the get. But the Gemara says that's not necessarily the interpretation of the Mishnah. Dilma b'nisuin to avar v'insev. Maybe the condition actually was you can't marry my father, you can't marry your father. It wasn't just an act of relations, an act of znus. And he means to say you can't transgress and marry them, even though it's not normal to marry them, but you can't do that, and so therefore it would be no proof to a situation of znus. And the Gemara continues, Chutz mishalo kedarka ma. What if he says, Harayam mutaris l'chol adam, you're mutter to everyone, but you can't have relations with them in the abnormal fashion. Bechedarka halo shayir. In the normal fashion, it's not a shiur. Odilmor maybe, mishkavei isha ksiv. It says mishkavei isha. And Rashi explains, Mishkavei Isha Ksiv, it says it in the plural, Hikish Shnei Mishkaveh L'chol Davar. We're comparing all the different kinds of ways that a person can lie with a woman, whether it's Shalo Kedarka, whether it's Kedarka, and so therefore that would be considered to be a shiur. And the Gemara continues, Chutz Mehafaras Nidarecha Ma. What if he says, you're divorced from me, but I still have the ability to annul your vows? What's the halach in that case? Benisuin Halo Shayir, in terms of marriage, he hasn't left anything off. Odilmor, maybe Isha Yikimenu, V'Isha Yefirenu Ksiv. The pasuk says that it's the husband who's the one that it maintains or annuls the Nadarim, and so therefore that is considered to be a shiur because he's saying he's still her husband in regards to Nadarim. And the Gemara continues, Chutz mitruma sayich ma. What if he says, with the exception of your truma? Rashi explains, mitruma sayich shimtin nasi l'kohen, that if you marry a kohen lo yachilcha b'truma, you're not allowed to have truma. You're still considered married to me in that regard. Again, b'nisuin halo shayir, you could say that in terms of marriage, it's not a shiur. Odilmor, maybe kinyan kaspo ksiv. When it talks about having truma, it talks about kinyan kaspo, meaning over here it is considered a shiur, because when she goes ahead and she gets married to a kohen and she can't have truma, she's not the full kinyan, so to speak, of that kohen. So therefore it's considered a shiur in the gerushin. And chutz mirusha sayich ma. What if he says, with the exception of the inheritance? And Rashi explains, chutz mirusha sayich shem tamusi ani yorshecha, meaning that if you die, I'm still going to inherit you, even though I'm divorcing you. Again, b'nisuin halo shayir. On the one hand, you can say that in terms of marriage, it's not considered a shiur. Odil malishi'ero v'yara Yarashosa ksiv. Again, it says l'she'ero v'yarashosa. It implies that it's the husband that is the one who's inheriting, and therefore it is considered to be a shear. In the gerushin, chutz mikidushech b'shtarma. What if he says to her, with the exception of getting a kiddushin with a document, meaning if someone tries to give you a kiddushin with a document, that's not going to be effective. Mi amrina nefsher de mekadesh la bekesef uvavia. Do we say that it's possible to do kiddushin in other fashion, with money, in other fashions, with money or with relations? Or dilmor maybe v'yatza v'haisa. It says v'yatza v'haisa. We compare the divorce to the marriage. Iskish havayos lahadadi take, with the different kinds of marriages are all compared to one another, meaning to say that she has to be able to engage in any type of kiddushin, otherwise it is considered a shear. And the Gemara says take, with the Gemara leaves it as a question. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Gufo shall get, the main part of the get, Hareat muteris l'chol adam, is when you write in the get that you are mutter to everyone. Rashi says, Gufo shall get, Iker ksav haget, kach yichtavu bo. The main part of the get, this is what should be written, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Pei Amud Beis.